All right, hello everybody. We are live once again as usual for our weekly Octopi Poker coaching with myself, Matt Hunt. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for joining me for this week's session. Let me just move my mic a little closer to me. That might work a little better here. As you can see, we've got a larger larger version of me on the stream that you can see today, but that's gonna change in just a second. So we're gonna dive into our drill for this week, or our topic for this week, which is, as you guys will know if you've been in our Discord challenges, it's playing the top of your range from the blinds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over the view right here to our normal view. So you guys should be able to see that coming through pretty straightforwardly. And once we have that all set up, I'm going to go into our trainer. I'm going to set up the drill that we want to use. So we're going to go to create drill. We're going to go for our normal MTT scenario. We're going to go complete hand. We're not going to focus purely on pre-flop or purely on post-flop. So we're just going to play it through all the way through the hand. And we're going to focus on two specific stack sizes here, which are 60 big blinds and 30 big blinds. And these are the stacks that I find to be really good guidelines of how our overall strategies are going to look in various situations. I think these are very good strategies, or very good situations to study, because I think it's going to really give you a sense of how our ranges are constructed when stacks get a bit deeper, and then when we get a bit shallower as well, of course. So we're going to dive in, and we're just going to hit play as small blind or big blind, which we know. Play against, surprise me, and in this case, we're going to be facing a raise. So fairly straightforward. And of course, we have to use our hand configuration as well. And we're going to go with 75% up to, let's say, 90%. So I'm not going to include the very, very strongest hands. We're just going to, fairly straightforwardly look at top of the range, but not, the absolute top. Now we do have to put the stack sizes back in there. And you know what? Let's not do that. Let's actually just do all stack sizes, because I want to show some of these 20 big blind spots, some of the deeper ones as well. We're just going to be in the blinds, playing against a raise from any position, and we have 75th to 95th percentile of our range. We've got to go back there. I don't know why it unselects here, but looks like we're good. Cool. Now, I know a couple of you guys were mentioning that you had a few issues with some of the drills for this week. I think it was the day 2 drill on Tuesday that a couple of people had an issue with. So if that's the case, if you let me know, just drop me a DM on Discord or something of that nature, and we'll try to look into that and make sure that we can fix things up. But the good news is that I think the bulk of the issues that we've had over the last couple of weeks as far as drill creation, they mostly relate to the way that the drills are interacting with the hand configuration options. So with the option to select the top whatever percentage of your range. So once we move on to not necessarily using that filter as much, we should have much more smooth interaction with the drills. But obviously we're going to fix these issues as well. Now our first spot, as you can see, we've got a button open. We're 50 bigs deep, and we have 9s in the small blind. Now I think a lot of players are at this depth quite inclined to look at a spot like this and say, well, I don't really want to stack off with 9s, so I'm just going to call. And I don't think that's a dramatic error, but I do think we are in a position where 9s is strong enough here that in a lot of situations we are going to be pretty favorable as far as stacking off with it, or pretty favorable as far as 3-betting it. And you can see here, it is pure 3-bet. It basically almost 8s plus. 8s is like near pure 3-bet. 7s is high frequency 3-bet here. So we do have plenty of opportunity to 3-bet a lot of these pocket pairs from the blinds here. So that's a good starting point. Now, we do get called, and we get this ace-10-4 flop. Now, I think the tricky part of playing a flop like this is naturally when we're up against a button flatting range, we're going to be up against a range that includes a decent amount of broadways, particularly the suited ones. We're going to be up against a range that includes a lot of pairs as well. And I think the most likely outcome here is that we are going to have some portion of our range that wants to check. I would not expect this to necessarily be a range bet spot, simply because we do have those pocket pairs under the 10. We do have various hands here, like let's say like some king high stuff that completely misses, doesn't have a gut shot. We have some suited connector stuff. So we have some weak hands here, and in particular, as far as Villain's range goes, Villain's range does contain a decent chunk of strong hands, and there aren't really a ton of hands that are weak enough that I think we can justify just kind of pushing our equity with a range bet here. So I don't think we're going to go with a range bet strat. I could be wrong on that, obviously. And I think as far as hands to check, I think nines is a hand that really is right in that territory of benefiting from a check here, just because we do have a pocket pair that's right below that second pair. We don't really get a lot of equity denial by betting. We don't really get any value by betting. We don't really get better to fold. All of those factors that normally might lead us to consider betting, they're just not really happening here. So I think it makes a lot of sense to check. Oh, mistake. Wow, already we're making mistakes. All right, well, let's see what we're doing. Okay, so if it's a 0.4% mistake, it's a very, very small mistake, right? So first of all, not a disaster by any means here. But every time you make a mistake here, you have to say, okay, well, what's the logical next best play if I thought the check was best and it's not? Well, I would think that it probably is going to be the B21. It's probably going to be the small bet. I don't think the half pot really serves particularly well. So we're going to bet small. Oh, okay. So this is a range bet spot. Okay, so I completely missed this one. Looks like I really underestimated how strong our range is and overestimated how strong Villains is really on this board. I think they evidently must have more weak hands than we would have thought. And even though we have, some stuff in our range like those king eights, the 10-7 or 10-7 as a pair, but like jack 7 suited, we have some pretty weak hands here in our range. Looks like Villain does have enough weak stuff that we can go ahead and just range bet here. So a little bit surprising. Did not expect that, but we made a mistake first up. So this is the value of studying these spots, obviously. Now, 40 bigs, ace queen off, small blind, cutoff does open here. And this is, I think, probably, it might surprise people here how much flatting we might do with this hand. Just because, I mean, this is really one where I would expect it's very possible all three options are being used at some rate here. But we're only 40 deep. We are facing 2.3 instead of facing a min raise, so that matters to some degree. Jam, we possibly do have some jams here at 40, but it's not going to be very many. We are going to probably be doing most of our jamming at 40 from big blind against button. I would think I'm actually going to hit call. Oh, blunder. Okay, terrible. Wow, I am punting today. Okay, I did not expect it to be that big of a blunder. It must be a 3-bet then. Okay, so wow. Okay, so it is doing some jamming. Okay, so this is where it's like, this is where it's kind of frustrating, right? Because it's a blunder to just call here. Like, I'm not going to pretend it's not a blunder, right? But logic wise, take a look, right? Ace Jack is mixing 3-bets and calls and a tiny bit of jams. We've got King Queen mixing 3-bets and calls and a tiny bit of jams. So the two hands directly surrounding it that aren't Ace King, those hands are actually calling at some rate. And of course, calling is very profitable here, but it looks like Ace Queen off strong enough to comfortably justify being part of our value range here. I'm curious, if the open was one position earlier, what would we be doing here? Okay, so we'd be mostly, we still wouldn't be calling, but the call would be very marginally worse here. And then if we were two positions earlier with the open, so let's say low jack opens, now we start doing some calling. Okay, so you can kind of see where I was coming from here. You can kind of see how I ended up with that blunder here. It's that cutoff open is just too wide for us to not 3-bet. And even though this hand is mixing some flats against low jack, We're doing predominantly, we're actually jamming here. More jamming than I would expect in small blind versus cutoff here. King 10 suited, Queen 10 suited, Jack 10 suited, pocket eights. I thought Ace King off might be doing more jamming. Interesting. Anyway, this is probably a spot that I need to put in some reps on. Now, we do get called after we 3-bet. And then we see this Queen 8-7. So the ultimate choice that we're faced with here is we have this 1.5 SPR or so. Clearly, it's a spot where a lot of our hands here are going to be getting the right kind of price to be all in. They're going to be wanting to bet and then, get chips in on the turn. And a lot of the time out of position, it makes the most sense here to ask what kind of, I guess, how many streets do we want to play here, right? Because in this case, if we bet the small size, we're basically going to be playing, or we're more likely to be playing 3 streets. It's going to be harder for us to just rip the turn because we're going to be shoving for about pot. If we bet the half pot size, it's going to be a lot more feasible to shove the turn. We're going to be shoving turn for about half pot. So half pot here is approximately a geometric size. And I think it's probably more likely that that is going to make more sense here just because that small bet size doesn't seem to me to really put that many hands in the cutoffs range in a tough spot here. So we're going to go with the half pot. Okay, good. I finally got one right. So this is actually, wow, this is actually a range bet spot. Again, I'm surprised by how many range bets we're seeing in these kinds of scenarios. The turn is a 3 of clubs, so puts a flush draw out there as well as a straight draw. As far as our betting options go, well, we have this very small kind of a weird size where we would be leaving a tiny SPR behind on river if we used it. So don't think we really want to use it there. So I think we really just faced with all in or check as our 2 primary options. And as far as this particular hand combo goes, I think we're favoring going all in. We don't have a club in our hand rather. So that's really beneficial. It allows villain to have stuff like ace jack of clubs, which is going to be in a tough spot here. So we're just going to shove. And that's a mistake? Come on. I'm getting wrecked today. Holy crap. All right. It has to be a check then. It can't be the B26. That's going to be so weird. Oh, there's a surprising amount of the B26. That's super, super weird. Like, I would never do that in game. It's a really, really difficult strategy to actually execute there where you're betting 25%. And then you're leaving like 1/6 pot behind on rivers. I mean, you're going to end up basically never being able to fold the river there, but yeah, that's really tough. I would not really be using that small size in game very much. Very interesting. You can see that hands like king queen here do benefit from jamming. Like this is another one where I got kind of screwed by ace queen. Like look at the range here, right? Ace queen off. That's okay, so shove is, yeah. Shove is fine here. That's weird that did it give me a mistake? So, yeah, I'm trying to understand this. Like, it gave me, okay, so I think did I click the wrong strategy? Oh, ignore, wait, maybe? Yeah, I'm confused because the strategy that's showing up, oh, that's the river strategy. Okay, that's why. All right, now here we go. Okay, so, yeah, we've got, like, a decent amount of checking with most of the combos here. Doesn't really seem to matter that much whether we do actually have a club or not. We do have, yeah, really interesting. As far as our overall range with this B25 goes, we've got a lot of top pair, some over pair. Obviously not a lot of distinct bluffs there. And with the SPR already being very low, it's really hard to use this size and then like figure out what your bluffs are supposed to be. Like you're not really getting a fold very often here. And then when you get called, like the river SPR is literally 0.2. You're shoving the river for 21% of pot. So you're basically supposed to shove pretty much everything, including like ace high. Is that for value or a bluff though? That's the thing. Like I don't even know if ace high is actually bluffing anymore. Like it might actually be a value bet. So there's definitely some weird stuff going on. I would have probably just gone for a jam here on the turn, but as you can see, king queen wants to jam a lot. Ace queen does not. Ace queen prefers to either check or bet smaller. So very interesting spot there. It did go check, check, and now this, surely we have to just be able to shove here. Okay, good. Yeah, we just get value here with ace queen, but even then it wants to do a little bit of checking. So surprising amount of checking here with a hand like ace queen, just kind of strong enough to be part of our sort of trappy range, I guess. But yeah, we're making blunders again. I'm struggling here. I'm struggling, guys. So this one, again, this is obviously going to be pretty close to, it's probably going to be more like that 75th percentile of our range, not the 90th, just because, you know, we have a7 suited, but we are blind against blind. So naturally, this is going to be a pretty strong portion of our range one way or the other. I don't think we're really in a position here where we have any reason to either shove or 3-bet. If we 3-bet, you know, getting shoved on, you know, really hard to fold, but it's also like not actually really getting value from anything. So I think we just benefit from calling here. And did we finally get one right? Come on. All right. Yes, good. All right, 100%. That's good. That's I feel like I'm back to normalcy, back to some degree of like, okay, things make sense again now. All right, so ace queen 5, small blind checks. Quite often on these ace high boards as the pre-flop caller, we actually have a slightly more polar strategy because the small blind or the out of position player is not checking a ton of super weak hands. They're checking a little bit more of a condensed kind of a range, like a bluff catcher sort of heavy range. So, hey Mathor, welcome. First one in the chat today, thank you. I think this, if we are going slightly more polar here, I think a7 with no backdoor actually makes more sense as a check. So we're going to hit the check button. Okay, so it wants to bet. Oh, okay, so the polar idea, I guess they're not checking as much medium strength stuff as I thought. They're checking a little bit of a weaker range than I thought, which is partly why the strategy is a bit less polar. But checking is okay here. Definitely not losing any substantial amount of EV. If we see this turn card, small blind checks again. In practice, I think people will be very capped here, but obviously in theory, we're going to see some hands existing that are going to want to check raise. I don't think that our check back range on the flop is that strong, but we do have enough ace X in there that I think we can kind of maybe take a somewhat polar approach here. Maybe use the B75, try to get a jack in a tough spot. Let's go with that. Okay, that was pretty good. All right, seems fine. So we've got B75 and B100 are the sizes that are used here. We're not really going small, so we are kind of going a bit more polar at this point. It just, you know, we weren't really able to go polar on the flop, or we weren't really able to start being polar at that point yet. Cool. All right, now we have 9s at 25. So this is where things get a little bit easier. I think this one's probably just going to be a jam against low jack. Yeah, almost pure jam. So we're either jamming or we're 3-betting small just to call off, get some value. So seems fine. 30 bigs, king, queen off, button big blind. I would think logically here, this is exactly the type of hand that if we shove, it's really hard to get called by worse, but also impossible to get better to fold. And if we 3-bet, it sucks to get shoved on. I would expect we probably just call here. Okay, well, it's mixing all three. That's interesting. Yeah, that's a surprise. It's like the only hand that's mixing all three. There's obviously a lot of hands that are mixing call and 3-bet. Some hands mixing 3-bet and jam. King, queen off is the only hand that's exactly in the middle of all three. Very interesting. Okay, we did call. That's fine. We're not going to donk this flop at all. We face a small bet. Versus small bet. I think here we have a pretty clear raise. I think that at deeper stacks, we might go with the larger raise size here, but I think since we're shallower and we're probably just mostly targeting a lot of the sort of offsuit, like strong offsuit stuff that doesn't really have like backdoors or anything like that. I think we're just going to go small. Raise, there we go. Oh, okay. It must be a big raise then. Okay. Yeah, all right. So it is a raise. Okay, yeah, again, I got kind of screwed. Like, it's a mistake because when with king queen off, we're only supposed to use the bigger raise size, but with king jack suited or king jack offsuit, there starts to be like some small amount of the smaller raise size mixed in. So certainly not a huge error by any means here. I think if you were to just have one raise size here of about 40%, which I think is a completely reasonable simplification, I would. This clearly would be a reasonable check raising hand. So we did go with the 50% raise. We got called. I think the mistake that a lot of people will make here is kind of forcing themselves to play like almost a jam strategy because we have like 1.3, 1.4x pot behind. And I think that can be a real problem because there's just not a lot of hands in button's range here that are particularly indifferent against the jam. It's like specifically maybe like Jack 9, Queen 9, Jack 10, Queen 10, obviously. Not really a lot in there. You know, all the King X is not indifferent, 9X is not indifferent. I think what we prefer here, I would guess that the region that we're probably targeting now is like a 9 with no straight draw. Or, yeah, I mean, 9 with no straight draw seems like a reasonable target. And I think we only need to go like this small size here in order to target that stuff. The 8 big blind size feels a little big because we'd have 13 bigs behind and there'd be about 32 in the pot. So I think we're going to go small here. Ooh, slight mistake. Okay, again, I'm getting wrecked. I mean, if it's a slight mistake, I imagine it's probably B50-ish. Yeah, okay, so we actually just do use the B50 size, the 8 big blind size. So it looks like it's not too big here. I don't know if I would really use this that much in practice. I think I would probably prefer like a geometric size there of, you know, just kind of, I guess it would be between those two sizes, like between the B30 and the B50. So just B40 or so. We do bet and get called. I think this is just a clear shove now. Yeah, I mean, we're shoving basically almost all of our range here for the most part. Pretty much shoving everything for value. You know, there's obviously some bluffs in there, like the 8-7s and stuff like that. So pretty reasonable spot there, I think. So far, you know, we've definitely run into some tricky ones. We've run into some spots where, you know, top of our range or the portion of our range that is on the stronger side is, you know, is going to have some difficulties. Now, what I'm going to do here is because we're in the blinds and the ranges that we're playing are so wide, I want to actually focus a little bit more on some actually stronger hands. So I'm going to go 85 to 95 percentile here. Then we're going to go save and train. Now so we limped the small blind. We face a raise from big blind. Generally speaking here, I think a lot of players will default to just wanting to shove this hand, but I think part of the problem is that usually a suited hand like this is going to have so much playability that we kind of benefit at least a little bit from having some post-flop spots play out here. And I don't think we can really ever get a better ace to fold. So I think we actually just call here. Let's see. Come on. Yeah, okay. It is pure call. That's good. So you can see the jams in our range here are there's a couple of, you know, suited kings that have a small shred of it in there, but for the most part, we're preferring pairs and offsuit ace hands, and then a bit of king queen off as well, just because they don't realize equity as well by playing post. So we prefer to be all in with those. Now, queen 4-4, I don't think we're going to have any donks here, so we're just going to check everything. We face 2 big blinds. I think it's probably a little bit tricky to fold ace high at this stage just because of how wide our range is. So I'm going to hit call. And yeah, we do call ace 5. We actually do a tiny bit of check raising. We do never fold ace high. In fact, we don't even fold that much king high. King high with a club we don't fold. Turn ace is obviously good for our hand. Range-wise, I don't think it's necessarily good enough that we get to do any donking. Yeah, okay, 100%. And we river a boat. So I think what we're looking at now is we kind of, we're basically just putting a queen or a flush in a tough spot. Maybe a four, but a four doesn't exist that much. I'm sort of torn between betting like 9 big blinds and then just shoving. And I kind of feel like maybe we just shove. I'm going to hit shove. Okay, yeah, I mean, we have like almost every size here. So we sort of have like a size for an ace and then a little bit of a smaller size for some flushes and even a little bit of queen X and things like that. So there's a variety of sizes being used here, but the shove being used for the ace X hands is obviously pretty logical. So that was good. All right, this time, again, blind on blind. I didn't mean for this to actually... Oh, okay, so I didn't realize it had reset some of the situations here. So surprise me, different stack sizes. Okay, facing a raise. Yeah, okay, that's good. All right. That's more like it. All right, so pocket jacks here in the small, facing under the gun 7. I think it's probably a bit too deep for us to have any kind of shoving range from small blind against under the gun 7. So most likely what we do here is just 3-bet to the 7 big blind size. Yeah, okay, it's pure 3-bet. 9s and 10s. Oh, we do actually have some shoves. Okay, so we have a bit more shoving than I thought here, but not a lot. There's not really anything that's pure shove. Seems fine. Okay, so deuce 3-6. I would expect that we probably actually have quite a few small bets here because I think a lot of overpair hands on this board are going to jam pre against that 3-bet. We kind of have there's some trappy stuff in under the gun 7's range, but I think small bet seems good here. Oh, no. Okay, it's a 0.1% mistake. Okay, so we got kind of screwed again. Bet 8. Okay, so we do... Okay, so we mix... Range-wise, we bet different sizes at different frequencies here, as you can see, but we're betting at a high rate. We do have, some hands that kind of favor the 50% size, and then some hands that favor the 20%. So it's kind of a mix there. We get shoved on. This is a clear call. We beat 10s. Double up. Okay, so hijack opening, we have 8s in the big blind. Now these are situations where, again, the question of whether or not we have a jamming range is an important one to answer. It is quite often going to be the case that we do have jamming ranges at this stack size, and I would think that the best logic here is to look at the jamming hands as being, a combination of hands that benefit from denying equity to various hands and don't play as well post flop, but that do have the ability to occasionally get called by worse if they shove, and then also a lot of the hands that are going to have the ability to actually fold out better combos. So that's going to be some suited Broadway hands, the weaker suited Broadways in particular. Also a lot of offsuit ace type hands. I think 8s is pretty squarely in that region here where it feels like it can shove. I think we're less likely to shove 7s, 6s, 5s in spots like this, but there tends to be quite a few situations where you'll shove deuces and 3s to get like 5s, 6s, 7s to fold, or you'll shove the lowest pairs and then you'll shove the medium to strong pairs, but you won't shove the best ones, or like 4s through 7s or something. I think we're going to shove is the end result here. Yeah, it is a pure shove. So yeah, this is a good example. Like we don't shove deuces, we do shove 3s, we mix 4s, we don't shove 5s, we do shove 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, and jacks, and we don't shove queens, kings, or aces. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on with the pocket pairs there, but a lot of it just relates to the types of hands that we expect villain to raise fold or raise call off. Okay, so 30 bigs this time. I think 10s is going to be probably a pretty fine shove here. Okay, we're mixing 3-bet and shove. Seems very reasonable. Okay, now we're king, queen off again, and this time we're much deeper. Okay, so I was hoping that we would get at least a couple of these spots today for sure. Now, I think that deep stacked 3-bet construction here is something that players tend to have a lot of difficulty with. They tend to struggle with it simply because from the big blind, we have to accomplish two things at once. We have to be more polar than we are from any other position, and we also have to be capable of, or at least our bluff range has to be capable of navigating post flop and realizing enough equity that we are, in good shape and we can actually, withstand the kind of post flop play that's going to exist at 80 big blinds. I think as a byproduct of that, a hand like King Queen off is once again going to be in some pretty ambiguous territory here, because King Queen off does have the ability to get some value from worse hands when the button calls the 3-bet, which is nice. But does it play especially well out of position at deep stacks? Not really. It does prefer a lower SPR, which is helpful, but we also have the downside here that we don't allow villain to retain any of the worse king high and queen high hands that they can have when they open the button. A lot of these king X and queen X hands are going to fold if we 3-bet. So we do have to consider that as well here. And I think that probably shifts us towards the territory where I would prefer to call instead of 3-bet. And let's see, normally when it makes us wait a little while, it means we got the question right. Ooh, okay, wow, that's a little bit more 3-betting than I was expecting here. So wouldn't have shocked me if we'd seen low frequency 3-bet, but it certainly seems like King Queen off, kind of in that region where, just like Ace Jack off, it is pretty much strong enough to get some value here and prefer to play that lower SPR spot. I thought we would pretty much be going with, maybe a low frequency of 3-betting here, but mostly call. You can see King Queen suited is kind of 50-50 here, and King Jack off suit is very low frequency 3-bet. So again, a little bit off with some of my ranges here. Might require me to put in some reps here and get my big blind 3-bet ranges a little bit more accurate. But overall, clearly call is not doing too badly. Now, we do get this Jack-Jack 7 flop. We're not going to have any donks here. It's not really a good board for us to do that. So we check and we face a small c-bet. Now, as far as our defense against this small c-bet, well, first of all, we actually have 3 different raise sizes here. We have the 4.5, the 7, and the 9.5. So I don't think our check raise range on this board is going to be so polar that we use the 9 big blind size here. I would be surprised here. But equally, I don't think it's going to be so linear or so merged that we would use the 4.5. I think we're probably going to use the 7 here. And I think King Queen off is likely to be the type of hand that is probably a pretty low frequency, if not potentially 0 frequency check raise, just because at this depth, we're mostly going to want our check raise bluffs to be somewhat capable of, possessing a little bit more equity, backdoor flush draws, maybe a little bit more in the way of picking up backdoor straight draws. So something like a King 9 of hearts might make more sense than King Queen off here. But I do think we're going to be strong enough to continue. So I'm going to hit call, and you can see it is 100% call. You can see that the raise size that we're using here is that 7 big blind size. So I guess I finally got one pretty accurate here as far as our response goes. We're not raising King Queen off, and when it comes to our raise size that we are using, it's that 55% size. Now, in this case, this is where it gets very weird on this board, because Jack 7 is now a run out where a lot of our check calls just became, well, some of them just became full houses, and some of them just got completely counterfeited. Like those low pairs, 6s and below, which are pretty much just going to play pure check call here, those now are dead. They have no equity at all. So it's quite interesting to imagine whether or not we might potentially even have some donk bets here. I do think it's a plausible scenario that we have some donks, but at the same time, the button is still completely uncapped. Button still has plenty of Jack X, plenty of 7X. It may not necessarily be the case that we have enough of an advantage here to actually do any donking. I'm going to check, because this hand is not going to be a great donk candidate one way or the other. Okay, so we do have some donking here. It's not the big size, it's the small size. But as you can see, it is a good enough card for our range that donking out here with some kind of frequency is going to function pretty well here. Now, button goes check back on the turn. Button goes with the check back on the turn, rather. And when the river is a 10 here and it completes the flush, it's easy to think that maybe our hand is a very good bluff candidate, considering that we are blocking the flush. But part of the problem is that on a board like this, a flush is one of the hands that we kind of want our opponent to have in order to put them in an indifferent spot on the river. We kind of want to use a big size with a range of full houses and bluffs and, you know, potentially just kind of put their flushes under as much pressure as possible. Now, it could be the case that, you know, if they're calling a good amount of flushes against a big bet on the river here anyway, it could be the case that the flush blocker is still quite relevant. But it also could be the case that it really isn't particularly meaningful at all. I do think, though, that we also have to kind of pay attention to the fact that on this board, given the rest of our range, a lot of our range has now either improved to, let's say, a full house or a 10, maybe a straight draw improved to a 10. Some hands improved to a flush. Ace high has a good amount of showdown value. We do actually have king high, so we do have some showdown value here ourselves. I do feel like we are quite close to the bottom of our range here, and it wouldn't shock me completely if this is a hand that does get used as a bluff at some rate, and then maybe the ace high region is the stuff that is strong enough that it wants to start checking. I would expect that we're bluffing with a lot of those underpairs quite frequently here. So stuff like sixes and below. We do have sixes, fives, four, threes, deuces. We have 30 combos of the underpairs here to use as bluffs potentially. And, you know, we are going to have quite a lot of combos to value bet. So it may not be that we can get away with just bluffing with those combos alone. But I would say, I think when push comes to shove, I am going to bet here. I'm going to bet the big size. Let's see what comes of it. Okay, 2% mistake. So probably came down on the wrong side of it there. The question that we always have to ask in the trainer now that we've been kind of dealt a mistake, we've been told we made a mistake, we always have to ask, is this a mistake at the range level or is it a mistake at the hand level? So is it that I picked a bet size that is not supposed to be used at all here? Or is it that I picked a bet size that is pretty good for our range, but this hand is simply not a hand that makes sense to bet that size? And my guess, if this is a 2% mistake, I do still feel like the overbet is probably going to exist in our range. So my guess is that this is probably just a hand level mistake where we picked a bad bluff candidate. So I'm going to actually change to a check here. Yeah, okay. It looks like that was good. We actually have 4 different sizes used in our strategy here. So we do have the big size. We also have a lot of the smaller ones too. But it comes down to this particular hand combo. It's not really showing up if we hover for some reason, but if we open up the full sim, it comes down to this particular hand combo not being a good bluff candidate here. If we want to look at the bluff candidates, the best thing to do really here is look at equity and ignore the weight of the range. And then just look at everything that is pretty much at the bottom end of our range. So stuff that doesn't really have a lot of showdown value. Basically anything from kind of here onwards, it looks like. And start to take a look at what the stuff is that's actually bluffing. You can kind of see that there's a couple of specific regions, obviously. Oh, is this? Oh, damn it. This is our response. Oh, that's annoying. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong node. We can do the same thing here. I don't know why I was looking at that node. I must be off my game today. This is the best way to do this. Yeah, this is much easier, much clearer. You can see where the bluffing region begins, right? You can see where the part of our region that wants to do some bluffing begins. And it's right here. So the best hand that bluffs here on the river looks like it's Queen 9 and Queen 8 because they have some straight blocking potential. Queen 6 and below don't like to bluff. And then the other stuff that really does like to bluff is if we get here with any kind of 9x or 8x hand, any kind of 9 high, 8 high type stuff that does get here. That's low frequency. It's not going to be in the range very much. If we look at the weighting, it's really small frequency here. But as you can imagine, these low pocket pairs are pretty decent bluffs. They basically just mix all of the sizes here although sixes does do a bit of checking, which is interesting. So you can kind of see there's a pretty strong correlation here as far as the hands that are in our range at a high frequency. The hands that we can easily have here are kind of not always bluffing, but favoring bluffing. And then the stuff that is super low frequency, like really hard for us to have, that's the stuff that it's completely okay for us to just always bluff with if we happen to get here with it. So like the 9 highs and 8 highs. So interesting spot. It does look like it kind of was just a hand level error rather than a range level error. And we face a bet here, and it's just going to be a fold. What? 2% mistake? Okay, that must be... All right, so this just got weird again. Okay. Why would we not fold king, queen high? It must just be that we're bluff catching against those low pocket pairs. It kind of has to be that. I don't think it's likely to be a good check raise candidate. Probably we're probably gonna check raise bluff with stuff that has a bit more blocking power over some of the Jack X and 7X stuff potentially. It must just be calling. Like, yeah, it's pure call. Wow. Okay, so now I need to look at this node. This is the node I accidentally looked at earlier on. This is much more like interesting now. So, okay, so let's go down to ignore weight. And let's now look at the stuff. Let's do the same thing that we did before, except let's focus on the stuff that's mixing calls and ignore the stuff that is pure fold. So we've got these kind of two distinct regions here. We've got a lot of basically king high and ace high in this area. And then we've got a lot of the 10x that has a low kicker kind of over in this area. So that is, I think what it kind of comes down to is we prefer to have, obviously we prefer to have like a straight blocker, which kind of makes sense here because the straights are going for some thin value, but it looks like we just prefer to have like a middle card. Oh, see, king queen off is not in this region. See what's going on with king queen off here. King queen off. Okay, this is what's happening. All right, so king queen off, bizarrely, when we specifically have the queen of clubs, it is a pure bluff catch. And when we have the king of clubs, it is a pure fold, which is super weird. Not really easy to ever pick out in game. Let's look at villain's size here, which is 90% on the river. If we look at where this size, oops, that's the wrong size. If we look at where this size is coming from, the bet 90 here, and we can't really highlight the sub range very easily, but if you think about the stuff that's betting the red size, the B90 size, you can see that the straights are betting at a decent frequency, not a huge one. You can see that flushes are definitely a reasonable part of this range here. Full houses are obviously in there. Overpairs are still in there. And in particular, queens is the most frequent overpair to be betting here. So the queen of clubs overall is a pretty distinct kind of a blocker here. Those are really hard to find in game. I thought, yeah, absolutely. These are super difficult. Like the bluff catches here, the bluffs, like these are very, very tricky spots, these double paired board spots. Not an easy one. You can see villain does actually have pocket threes, so they do have one of those types of hands that I think can potentially make sense as a bluff here. And it is noteworthy that I think there are players out there who are going to find, they're going to kind of find the bluffs but not the value bets, so they're going to actually end up over bluffing. Like it's not infeasible here that players are going to, they're going to know to kind of bluff with pocket threes, but they're not really going to know to value bet a straight or value bet a flush, let's say. So it's not inconceivable that some players will end up over bluffing these types of situations, but it's also just one of those things that is going to be very, very player dependent and not very easy to really kind of pick out from looking at sims. It's just going to be one of those exploitative adjustments that we have to kind of get accustomed to making in real time. So let's do a few more. 20 big blinds, pocket tens, trivial shove. Very easy. 30-ish big blinds. We're against early position this time. Doesn't really feel like a great 3-bet. I feel like we have to be very, very polar with our 3-bet here. I'm just going to call. We may do some shoving. Oh, okay. Interesting. Wow, so we're not doing any shoving. And ace-queen off. Ace-queen off is 3-betting. Ace-queen suited is not. Okay, so that's, again, it's another pretty weird one. They're definitely dealing me some pretty interesting and kind of ambiguous spots in this drill, that's for sure. We do call and we get the king 8-7. We're going to check. We're not going to have any donks here. Villain finds a big size, and I think now this becomes pure fold, I would imagine. Yeah, pure fold, okay. So we don't have a lot of raises here, but we do have a few, and ace-queen off is not a great candidate for continuing there against the big size. Okay, so this one, we're now, again, ace-queen off versus low jack. I feel like this is almost like the ace-queen off drill. It's kind of exposing some of the errors that I'm making with ace-queen off specifically. It's kind of interesting. Again, I feel like I'm slightly more inclined to call here, but part of that is because we're now 50 deep, and I think it's reasonably clear we don't have shoves at 50 against low jack. Oh man, I would think there's probably at least some 3-bet that comes in here, but I'm going to hit call. Could be wrong again. Yeah, okay, so it's, yeah, again, it's pretty high frequency 3-bet. So it looks like one of the things that I'm not quite picking up on is just the fact that ace-queen off is actually much more prone to 3-bet than ace-queen suited here. So that's kind of an interesting one. Not one, like I said, not one I'm probably finding enough of in real time. So curious about that one. Fairly trivial check on flop. And we face the small bet size again here. I think with a good ace high plus a club, I don't imagine we can fold. So I'm going to hit call. Probably not a great raise candidate here. Yeah, we do play pure call. We don't do any raising with this hand. We do have obviously a decent chunk of raises here, but not that many. The 7 turn doesn't really change anything, so we're not going to do any donking there. 4 of clubs river. Now, I think this is a type of spot that players tend to struggle with a lot. I think that the reason simply is that they sort of struggle to weigh up the fact that we have a blocker here, we have a club in our hand, versus the fact that we have, you know, ace high, we have some degree of showdown value. And I think a lot of the time, the answer is really going to come down to how feasible is it that the low jack here is just going to check back with a worse ace high if we check. And I think the answer there is probably not very. I don't think they're going to check back a lot of ace high here. So I would probably go with a bluff here, and I think we're probably going to bluff like 75 perhaps. 5% mistake? Oh my gosh. I am getting absolutely wrecked today. Absolutely wrecked. It must be a check then if it's a 5% mistake to use the B75. Yeah, it's pure check. Okay, wow. So range-wise, again, we were fine with the B75. We do have a little bit of everything. Okay, so this is going to be another one where I'm probably like one notch off in terms of strategy here. So like, this is the river. This is our strategy. If we have ace 9 with the 9 of clubs, we bet at a high rate. If we have ace 6 with the ace of clubs, ace 5 with the ace of clubs, like ace 10 with the 10 of clubs or the ace of clubs, we're bluffing with almost all of these hands to some degree, except we're not bluffing with ace queen, and we're only barely, we are actually bluffing. I guess we're kind of block betting for the small size with ace jack with a club. Interesting. But basically ace queen is right in that territory of wanting to check here, whether or not we have a club. So little bit of an over bluff from myself there. So Hostito says, I screenshotted a weird similar one from the challenges this week. Shoving ace jack suited was a mistake, but ace jack off and most other Broadway hands were shoves. Yeah, I mean, that one is going to come down to, when you're thinking about shoving, it's going to come down to the, you know, what's the trade-off and what's the upside of the alternative option. And a lot of the time with a hand like ace jack suited, you have plenty of post-flop playability, but in some cases you're in a situation where if you shove or if you 3-bet and get it in or something like that, you're not going to get substantial action from ace 10 or king jack or something like that, but you are always going to get action from ace queen and ace king, which is not necessarily what you want, right? And of course, if there was a spot where you could get ace queen off to fold by shoving ace jack, then it might be pretty good, but that's pretty rare. So you always want to think about what the opponent's response is, what the different hands are that exist within our strategy, and what they're actually gaining from each action. Because if a certain hand seems like it's not, like it doesn't make sense that it's not taking a certain action, we have to look at, you know, why that might be the case and what is it actually gaining, what is it achieving through that action, if anything. All right, we'll do one more hand. We'll make this the last one for today's session. We have ace queen suited right here, so great hand to discuss. We have seen before that ace queen suited is mostly going to be a lot of calling in these situations, just because it plays so well post flop. And it does a good job of protecting our flatting range. You can see there's a tiny bit of 3-betting there, but yeah, we prefer ace queen off. Queen jack deuce, good flop, obviously, very good flop for our range, and well, very good flop for our hand, not fantastic for our range, but I think this is a clear raise. I think this hand needs to be part of our raising range. Yeah, 100% frequency here, raising ace queen suited. Basically, all of our ace queen is just always raising against a small bet. We get the 3 of spades turn. This seems like a reasonably clear turn card for just a fairly simple geometric strat. So we're going to be looking at something like this B75 here. I think that makes a lot of sense to go with. Yeah, you can see it's almost pure here, basically pure. We're just going with that fairly simple B75 or check for the most part. There's a little bit of B50 in there, but not really a lot. And now we get this river situation where river bricks off, and we have less than pot behind. This seems like a reasonably good shove spot as well. So we're going to shove. And yeah, we have another very clean strat here of pretty much shove or check. So we don't really have any small bets that come into the equation. Just a fairly straightforward situation where a lot of our draws missed, a lot of our values stayed very strong. So we just go polar and we're shoving with value and bluffs. And it's fairly straightforward. Cool. So that's a good spot to wrap it up for today. We obviously got through a lot of interesting scenarios. I got kind of wrecked in a few of these, which is always humbling and useful to experience. And next week, we're going to be on a catch-up week, of course, as usual, with our 5-week cycle of the challenges. So I will post all the details, of course, on Monday, just to remind you guys about the catch-up week, and we'll clarify what's going on with some of the drills that people have had issues with. But otherwise, I think that the structure of these is, you know, working pretty well with the new functionality in the Sims, in the trainer. And we're going to pretty quickly be able to kind of move into some new areas. I have a topic in mind already for the new cycle. It's going to be a very interesting one. So I'm looking forward to sort of showcasing that for you guys and letting you guys know what's going to be going on there. But in the meantime, I think that's a good spot to wrap it for today, like I say. So thanks, everybody, and I will see you all again soon. I'll see you in the Discord. Cheers.